On behalf of my team at the Visayas Cluster, I welcome you all to another leg of the World Bank's Implementation Support Mission to the PRDP. Despite the calamities and now, the pandemic that surrounds us, I wish to fill this trying time with hope and optimism, not just by presenting problems, but by presenting solutions. PRDP is an arm that is committed to working with its partners who aspire for a climate-smart, climate-resilient agri-fishery sector. In this five-part report, we will be discussing in totality the COVID-19 and PRDP in the Visayas cluster, the shifting demand of commodities as disrupted by COVID. I hope that with this report, we could engage ourselves in more development work that will produce new and revised frameworks and processes adapted to the needs of the times, and for the farmers and fisherfolks that we serve as we are transitioning to a new normal towards recovery. At the heart of PRDP is the strong conviction to continue to enable communities and expand opportunities. Let me share how PSO Visayas Cluster see itself during the period of pandemic and how it coped with the situation to deliver its project development objectives. Visayas has three regions, with dispersed island provinces apparent in central Visayas, the landmass of Panay Island and Negros Island with Guimaras separated in western Visayas, and the landmass of Samar and Leyte with Biliran separated in eastern Visayas. Aside from the land area utilized for the agricultural commodities, the coastlines of the provinces are also utilized for its fishery resources.
Agriculture is one of the economic drivers of Region 6. 60% of its total land area is used for agriculture, and 10% of its population is registered as farmers. The region has 14 major commodities under crops, fisheries, livestock, and poultry. In Central Visayas, 44% of its land area is attributed to agricultural use, with 12% of the population registered as farmers. It serves as the center of economic activities, with the second largest urban economic center and regional business hub in Cebu. In contrast, Bohol's economy relies on agritourism, while prioritizing being the rice granary of the region. Negros Oriental is still largely agricultural, prioritizing livestock, coconut, sugar, and rice. Eastern Visayas has 6 provinces in 3 big islands: Leyte, Southern Leyte, Biliran, Samar, Eastern Samar, and Northern Samar. Each province prides of twin development potentials, mainly agriculture and tourism. For its white sand beaches, caves, stone formations, and old churches and artifacts. Agricultural area covers 46% out of the region's land area of around 2 million hectares. 10% of its 4.4 million population are registered as farmers. These are the major commodities of the region under crops, fisheries, livestock, and poultry.
Taking a macro view of agriculture and fisheries in the Visayas shows Region 6, with the highest GRDP contribution at 17.2% or 64.3 billion pesos in 2018. This was reflective of 60% of the land area attributed to agricultural use, with an average farm size of 1.12 hectares. The productivity of the sector translated to having the lowest poverty incidence among farmers and fisherfolks in the Visayas at 26.2% and 16.4% respectively. The region, however, faces issues on its agricultural labor force. It displayed an aging farming population with 44.11% of farmers over 50 years old, the highest in the Visayas. It also faces fewer of its total workforce employed in the agriculture and fisheries sector at only 15%, the lowest in the cluster. In Region 7, GRDP contribution of agriculture and fisheries in 2018 was 5.19% or 30.8 billion pesos. As Region 7 is an urban and business hub, the main driver of the economy are the industry and services sector with GRDP contribution at 39% and 56% respectively. With only 44% of its land area attributed to agricultural use, average farm size is lowest in the Visayas at 0.7 hectare. Lower farm output from this farm size translated to lower incomes, with poverty incidence at 34.7% and 18.7% for farmers and fisherfolks respectively. On the brighter side, the region shows a younger workforce in the sector, with only 18.7% of farmers aged over 50 years old, the lowest in the Visayas. Opportunities for agriculture in the region is a farming system that could maximize farm output with its smaller farm size, linked with the market demands of the commercial or business community. Few years ago, Eastern Visayas bannered in the news for having a high incidence of hunger and malnutrition, and this was largely attributed to the depressing rate of poverty, with poverty incidence among farmers and fisherfolks at 42.5% and 30.5% respectively. The region is also exposed and vulnerable to typhoons. In 2020 alone, 3 typhoons, Ambo, Quinta, and Roli, caused damages to the agriculture and fisheries sector worth around 200 million pesos. While still recovering from the effects of Tisoy and Ursula from last year. The vulnerability of the region to typhoons affecting farm productivity, with 31% of its workforce engaged in the agri-fishery sector. This contributed to the low farm output and high poverty incidence in the region. This is reflected by the GRDP contribution in 2018 at 25.9 billion pesos, the lowest in the Visayas. In summary, this slide shows the macro view of the socio-economic profile of the agri-fishery sector in the Visayas cluster. Each region has its own characteristics that follows a unique approach in tackling the issues of the sector. With the context of the agriculture and fishery of the Visayas in mind, we'll appraise the COVID-19 scenario in the cluster and the domestic trade and logistics situation. COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by a new strain of coronavirus that spread all over the world. The pandemic affected the whole of the Philippine society as its effect caused governments to issue policy responses to stop the spread of the virus. The next slides will show how the policy response in terms of quarantine measures changed according to the magnitude of active cases in the area.
In the Visayas, Region 7 was the first to experience the onslaught of COVID active cases. Starting April, active cases in Cebu City kept increasing and peaked in June, reported at 1,727. Since then, fresh daily active cases gradually decreased, with active cases concentrated in Cebu Province. Between March to July, Urban Center, Cebu City imposed the strictest quarantine measure, that is, enhanced community quarantine, due to the rising cases reported. Since July, quarantine measures loosened to GCQ and MGCQ, following the decrease in the active cases in the region. After Region 7, Region 8 active cases peaked in August with 706 reported in Samar. However, based on the graph, the region is on danger of having another wave of active cases from October onwards, with active cases in Samar still increasing. After Region 8, active cases in Region 6 peaked in September, concentrated at the urban centers. Bacolod City had the highest active cases, reported at 1,446 during September. By October, Iloilo City posted the highest number of active cases reported at 853. In response to the magnitude of active cases in the area, quarantine measures were imposed. At the onset last March to April, enhanced community quarantine was declared in the urban centers of the region. Starting May up to the present, quarantine measures oscillated between GCQ and MGCQ, depending on the level of active cases in the areas.
Let us take a look at the domestic trade and logistics situation in the Visayas during the pandemic. Given the archipelagic structure of Visayas, there are about 93 government-run ports and 70 private ports listed in the Philippine Ports Authority database, with Eastern Visayas having the most number of ports at 45% of the total Visayas port statistics. Operations of these ports continue despite the lockdown, although higher quarantine classification was declared in the Visayas regions. Port operations continued with limitation. This limitation was an offshoot of the added health and sanitation precautions and reduced personnel manning the port operations.
According to Maritime Industry Authority, passenger ships were more affected than the cargo ships. 90% of the regular cargo ships are still in operation. Looking at the graph, the number of ships on a normal operation, this refers to cargo ships that completed its operation in accordance with their Certificate of Public Convenience, drastically increases from June to July. Region 7 and 6 doubled its cargo ships operation during this time because of the more relaxed quarantine classification. However, comes August, the number of normal cargo ship operation declined. Lower trips frequency were also observed. The turnaround of cargo ships was longer due to the practice of requiring container vans to be filled before they are shipped. Also, discharging of cargoes was slower because of curfew and strict implementation of truck bans by the LGUs. There are several reported ship cancellations and not completed voyage starting March up to the second quarter of the year. This graph makes use of the available PSA data on domestic trade, which only covers the second quarter of 2020. Domestic trade is slowing down across the regional cluster. In Region 6, the quantity of domestic trade in the second quarter of 2020 is 47% of the reported domestic trade for the same period in 2019. In terms of value, the trade quantity translated to 19 billion. This is 10 billion less of what is recorded in 2019. While in Region 7, domestic trade hit rock bottom in the second quarter of 2020, from 1.8 million metric tons in 2019 to 69,000 metric tons in 2020. As to domestic trade value, from 42.5 billion in 2019, it dropped to 5.3 billion in the same quarter in 2020. Meanwhile, Region 8 posted 28% of the domestic trade of the same quarter in 2019. The 2020 domestic trade value is at 7.8 billion, which is 25% of the 30.7 billion posted in 2019. Looking at the whole of Visayas, the domestic traded quantity in the second quarter of 2020 dropped to 17% that of 2019. For the traded value, 102 billion in 2019 fell to 32 billion in 2020, which is 31% of the previous year. To buffer the effect of COVID-19 disruptions to the food supply chain, the Department of Agriculture issued a memorandum circular ensuring the seamless and smooth transport of food, cargoes, and agri-fishery inputs essential to food production and processing. On the other hand, Marina issued a memorandum circular in July 2020 that enjoined all domestic shipping lines to allocate at least 12% of a vessel's cargo capacity to agricultural and food products, and to extend a discount of 40% of their published shipping rates for all agricultural and food product cargoes. As to air transport, Visayas has 12 major airports. All airport operations were suspended during the enhanced community quarantine, except when they had to cater to cargoes and transporting essential goods and health workers responding to the emergency. The number of flights, the volume of passengers and cargoes were significantly affected by the imposed restrictions. This was translated in second quarter of 2020 PSA data, wherein no domestic trade was recorded. Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines clarified that from mid-March to June, the cargoes are mostly limited to medical equipment and supplies.
In this section, we will present the effect of COVID to the agriculture and fishery sector in terms of the industry players of select commodities and the PRDP implementation. Looking at the Visayas, the highest number of affected players belong to the native chicken value chain, followed by coconut, goat, and swine. These commodities are the major commodities in the Visayas, and which the PRDP has funded sub-projects. Let's take a look at each region's situation in their commodity value chains.
Estimated 855,000 players in the value chains of commodities shown were affected. Highest share of affected players belong to the native chicken value chain at 58%, followed by coconut at 25%. Producers had the highest percentage share among affected players at around 99%. Still, around 800 traders, 518 processors, and 595 wholesalers, retailers, and institutional buyers were affected. Any interruption in the value chain would be felt by the rest of the players in the chain. Downstream disruptions have a huge impact on the upstream, more so that there are more players in the production segment. In Region 7, estimated 394,000 players in the value chains of the commodities shown were affected. The same with Region 6. Highest share of affected players are in the native chicken value chain at 69%. Also, among all players, producers had the highest share of affected players at around 99%. In Region 8, estimated 6,500 players in the value chains of the commodities shown were affected, with the highest percentage share of affected players located in the banana value chain at 84%, followed by abaca at 13%. Following the trends in the other regions, producers had the highest share among affected players at 93%. Still, around 351 traders, 17 processors, and 85 wholesalers, retailers, and institutional buyers were also affected.
In support to the above discussion on the affected players in the value chain of priority commodities in every region, we will now take a closer look at the industry trends observed during this pandemic. We will be looking at the local industries of native chicken, banana and swine, as well as show the industry trends of commercial crops like abaca and seaweeds, which caters to the international market. Significant trends observed in the native chicken industry are: 1. Decrease in demand due to closed down institutional buyers and decreased tourist arrival. 2. Restricted mobility of viajeros who trade native chicken across borders. 3. Surplus of native chicken supply due to decreased demand was sold to local markets utilized for home consumption. For the banana industry, significant trends observed are: 1. Irregular operation of processors resulting to low buying price from local processors. 2. Limited farming activities. 3. Limited locally hired vehicle available for transport of traded banana. And 4. Surplus of supply utilized for home consumption and feeds for livestock and poultry.
To continue the discussion on the significant trends to commodities with importance to the local economy during this pandemic, let us take a look at the swine industry. Based on the data from Bureau of Animal Industry, Animal Quarantine Service in Region 6, an upward trend was observed in terms of the shipped out volume of live hogs from the region. The surplus volume is being shipped to Cebu, Manila, Eastern Visayas, Luzon, and Mindanao. There are also some stocks that were intertraded among Region 6 provinces. It is noted that the volume shipped out to Luzon provinces and Manila were the highest as recorded. It is also to be noted that from April to May, volume shipped out from areas other than Cebu and interprovincial trade in the region is at its lowest. While Region 6 is an exporter of hogs to Luzon and Mindanao, Region 8 is an importer of live hogs from Mindanao and Region 7, Bohol and Cebu, during March to September 2020.
Significant trends in the swine industry are: 1. The unhampered live hogs movement as a result of ASF-free Region 6. 2. Increased outbound hogs to Luzon from June to present. 3. Livestock auction market transactions decreased in March to May. 4. Proliferation of meat retail roadside stalls. And 5. Low demand from institutional buyers. Moving now to the commodities which are part of the global value chain. This slide shows the volume of abaca fibers shipped into the grading and baling establishments present in Region 8. These GBAs act as consolidator for the abaca fibers coming from the abaca producing provinces inside and outside Eastern Visayas. As can be seen in this slide, the fibers delivered to the buyers from Region 8 provinces increased from March to April, then the volume decreased until July, when some restrictions were imposed in the region. From July to September, traded volume is observed to follow an upward trend. For the abaca fibers from Mindanao, it continues to follow an upward trend within this period. For abaca, significant trends observed are: inter-province boundary restrictions in July due to increased cases in Eastern Visayas, decreased production due to the typhoon damaged abaca-producing provinces, limited farming activities for aged farmers, unhampered shipment from Mindanao to Leyte GBEs and processors. For Region 6, existing inventories at the warehouses of Class A traders.
The next commodity that we will discuss is seaweeds, where Region 7 plays a major role as center for carrageenan processing and exporting. During the first half of 2020, there was higher volume traded compared to the same period last year, while from June onwards in 2020, the opposite was observed. In general, volume traded in 2019 and 2020 was fluctuating, but what is most notable in 2020 is that the volume shipped in August dropped to half of the volume in July.
Significant industry trends observed for the seaweeds industry in the Visayas are: demand for carrageenan has decreased and herb prices have fallen in the international market. Closure of 2 carrageenan processors in Cebu. Limited farm activities for aged farmers. Seaweeds were stocked until prices have stabilized, and decreased production for typhoon-damaged seaweed-producing provinces. After studying the effects of COVID to the agri-fisheries sector in Visayas, let us now take a closer look at its effect on the implementation of PRDP sub-projects with the 2 main driving components, IREAP and iBuild, along with the GAF unit. IREAP enterprises support priority commodities of the regions. At present, there are 27 commodities supported under PRDP, and among these commodities, swine and native chicken have the most number of sub-projects under IREAP. Sub-projects under IREAP are mostly micro-enterprises. These amount to around a total of 426 million pesos, benefiting 290 proponent groups and 20,023 individual beneficiaries.
From these approved sub-projects, let us look at the financial performance of IREAP as of October 2020. The component's total disbursement rate is 80%, or a cumulative value of around 272 million pesos. Region 6 has a disbursement rate of 76%, Region 7 with 69%, and Region 8 with 97%. Now, let us take a look at the different levels of sub-project implementation as affected by COVID. Let us start with sub-projects with completed procurement status. At this stage, these sub-projects are already operational and earning as a result of the provided interventions of PRDP. Of 119 approved sub-projects, 66 are completed. During the pandemic, 50 SPs out of the 66 SPs had their operations affected in either their production or marketing activities. These enterprises are either into processing or crops trading. Under processing enterprises, affected commodities or product form include squash, tablea, cocoa fluid, duck egg, and bahalina. On the other hand, the remaining 16 completed sub-projects of the 66 remain operational and were not greatly affected by the pandemic. Most of these are in the livestock and poultry sector. On this slide, it shows the number of sub-projects at different levels of implementation that encountered some delays because of COVID. From the 53 sub-projects, there are 25 with disbursement delays caused by the difficulty in transmitting signed financial documents. These are from the provinces of Leyte, Southern Leyte, Biliran, Samar and Eastern Samar in Region 8, Bohol, Siquijor in Region 7, and Negros Occidental and Guimaras in Region 6. In order to minimize the delays, electronic copies of the documents were used as basis for the initial review and processing. In terms of procurement, there are 7 sub-projects that encountered some delays. These are from the provinces of Negros Occidental, Bohol, Siquijor, Leyte, and Southern Leyte. Some of the suppliers encountered problems in delivering the procured items, which were addressed by the issuance of the IATF IDs. Meanwhile, Implementation progress remained normal for some sub-projects in the provinces of Iloilo, Capiz, Antique, and Negros Oriental. The reasons on the effects of COVID to the implementation of IREP sub-projects are the same as those discussed for the industry. What we are about to show you is the overall physical status of iBuild sub-projects implementation ending September 30, 2020. Sub-projects under original loan are substantially completed with almost 95% physical accomplishment. Implementation of original loan sub-projects started way back 2015, and it took almost 5 years to complete the sub-projects. For the first additional financing, which commenced last 2018, the trend of physical progress continues to increase, with only a year and a half of implementation. This is because some of the issues and concerns encountered in the original loan sub-project implementation were already addressed prior to the first additional financing implementation and during the sub-project review and appraisal. With the threat of global pandemic and with the PRDP's mandate on social safeguards, health and safety of the workers is our priority. We need to follow local protocols, IATF guidelines, and DPWH memorandum circulars, which obviously burns contractors' money and time. And with this, we will give you the COVID effects in sub-project implementation. Man down. Limited manpower on site due to border restrictions. Only minimal and minor items of work can be done on site because most of the locally hired personnel are unskilled. Hold up. This concerns the reduced frequency of delivery of materials, especially those materials outside the province, cargo vessels in ports, prioritizing the essential goods and medical supplies over construction materials. Access denied. Mobility of technical and skilled personnel were limited in some LGUs. The affected manpower are the skilled workers living outside the sub-project location due to lockdowns and quarantine restrictions. Time out. Contractors' requests for work suspension during pandemic due to insufficient resources on site such as manpower and materials. The cash flow of contractors were also affected. The following figures that you're about to see will make you wonder how and why. iBuild component under original loan disbursement target for 2020 is 716 million pesos. Out of the 716 million pesos target, only 317 million pesos, or 44%, was dispersed despite an average physical accomplishment of 95%. It only means that we need to double our effort to catch up the remaining 56% deficit of our disbursement target for the next 3 months, or else it's going to be a long year for all of us. COVID has greatly restricted the liquidation, billing, liquidation cycle of the disbursement process. Hence, contractors ran out also their own financial liquidity. Now, let's move on to the disbursement status of the first additional financing. The same scenario happened. We targeted almost 494 million pesos for 2020, and with 3 months remaining, we are only 39% of our target. Once again, we need to catch up for the remaining 61%. But on a positive note, with COVID just around the corner, roaming around and separating us 2 meters apart, we still managed to disburse and deliver, even with restrictions. But this is not an excuse for us not to perform and not to disburse. In fact, this is just an extra height we need to climb in order for us to reach our goal. We'll take it from that. So in order for us to catch up with our target, we need to identify those factors pulling us back during this pandemic. We need to find solutions to those problems for us to have a run on our targets. So let's break them one by one. Dislocated joint. Difficulty in conveying the Joint Inspectorate Team, LGU, RPCO, and PSO in conducting JIT inspection for billing due to border closure, different working arrangements, and travel restrictions, causing delay in conducting JIT. No work, no pay. With the work suspensions and limited resources on site, accomplishment of contractor was also limited. It means that no accomplishment was eligible for billing. With no accomplishment on site, scheduled or targeted billing for certain month may spill over to the succeeding month. Freeze delivery. Delay in transporting of billing documents from LGU to RPCO to PSO due to limited courier operations, border restrictions, reduced frequency of sea and air travels. And we're not done yet with COVID. Even post-implementation activities, such as operations and maintenance audit for completed sub-projects, were also affected. Under the Philippine Rural Development Project, Global Environment Facility is tasked to strengthen the conservation of the coastal and marine resource base in targeted project areas by rehabilitating the marine protected areas. It also provides sustainable livelihood projects to fisherfolks to increase their engagement in the management of the MPAs. For the Visayas cluster, the project covers 3 sites, namely Guimaras Strait in Guimaras Province for Region 6, the Nahon Bank in Bohol for Region 7, and Giwan Coast in Eastern Samar for Region 8. For the period of June to November of 2020, we would like to highlight the accomplishment of JEF Unit of the Project Support Office Visayas Cluster as follows. For the province of Guimaras, all inputs for the first tranche of MPA rehabilitation sub-projects were already procured and are being liquidated by the PPMIU. Worth mentioning is the completion of the concrete guardhouse with a project cost of 1,262,198 pesos for Tumalintinan Point Marine Protected Area in the municipality of San Lorenzo, province of Guimaras. For the province of Bohol, on September 1, the PLGU turned over 1 small patrol boat for Kataban and Gindakpan MPAs in the municipality of Talibon, Hingutanan West and Bilang-Bilangan East MPAs in the municipality of Bien Unido, and Sidlacan MPA in the municipality of Carlos P. Garcia, and 220 units artificial reefs for the Agining and Sidlacan MPAs in the municipality of President Carlos P. Garcia were delivered and deployed on July. Other inputs for the first tranche, like floating guardhouses, markers and buoys, and bamboo rafts, were already awarded to suppliers and are under construction or fabrication. For the microenterprise sub-projects, the final tranche for the 8 sub-projects amounting to 806,440 pesos were already downloaded by PLGU Bohol to the proponent groups last November 4. Lastly, for JEF sites in Giwan Coast in the province of Eastern Samar, procurement of equipment and facility and capacity development activities amounting to 22,192,704 pesos is ongoing. What did the PRDP, specifically the cluster, do to adapt to the situation? Hereunder is a summary of the measures undertaken.
This global pandemic does not only close borders, ports, and airports, but on the positive side, it also opens new innovations and opportunities. With the use of technology and internet, step by step, we are getting used to what they call the new normal. Specifically, PSO Visayas cluster opened virtual port. Due to limitations in sea and air travels, PSO opens the virtual port by allowing the RPCO and LGUs to submit electronic copy of billing documents and monthly progress reports for processing, while hard copy documents in transit. This is to offset the delay in courier services and cuts out disbursement. Virtual project staff, use of JO video, virtual JIT, and virtual supervision. Those staff under work from home arrangement became virtual project staff in attending meetings, receiving instructions, and delivery of outputs. Virtual meetings through online platforms available. All components and units can now conduct meetings as often as possible to discuss issues in the implementation and status of project. Virtual trainings. To continue the implementation of activities, the different components shifted to the virtual platforms for trainings. Meetings and trainings can be conducted anytime, anywhere, safely. In summary, the effects of COVID is rooted on the border restrictions and quarantine measures, disrupting agri-fishery supply chains to farm labor and production, and MSMEs and large processors that resulted to output losses and decreased income of agri-fishery industry players. At the project level, COVID-19 interrupted and delayed technical assistance delivery to project beneficiaries. Despite of the adverse effects of COVID, there is a silver lining towards recovery for affected industry players and project operations. Innovations on marketing of locally produced agriculture and fishery commodities surfaced, such as Talipapa mobile stores, Kadiwa Market on Wheels, selling fruits, vegetables, and fishery commodities were opened to decongest public markets. Digital marketing of agri-fishery products took off during the pandemic. This resulted to local patronage of commodities. Stimulus package injected could result to increased production. 1. Urban agriculture was supported by the Department of Agriculture and boomed during the pandemic. 2. Small farmers and fishers were provided with emergency and production capital requirements. 3. MSMEs were provided with additional working capital to recover losses and resume operations. As we transition to the new normal, PRDP-PSO Visayas dials up to further enable the agriculture and fishery communities and industries in building resilience against shocks like the effects of COVID and natural disasters. D. A database for supply chain networks made robust for informed decision-making. I. Inventory and storage capacities enhanced and aligned to technical requirements of the market. A. Agility of enterprise enhanced by building strong financial liquidity incorporated in business continuity and sustainability plans. L. Logistics infrastructure based on and guided by the needed of agri-fishery supply chain networks. S. Shelf life of commodities extended through appropriate processing and packaging technologies. S. Socioeconomic safety nets for project beneficiaries like insurance and stimulus packages until they are capable of standing on their own. On the part of the policy, trade channels should be kept open so that markets can play an instrumental role in economic recovery, observing health protocols as a new normal way of doing business. Defining policies in health and in economic terms in the face of COVID-19 is complicated, diverse, complex, electric exercise, and is a continuing challenge for the industry players, service providers, and policymakers in the agri-fishery sector. In the quest to follow health protocol, accomplish tasks at hand, and develop solutions to hard-hit agri-fishery sector, we are driven to make use of what is handed to us. We managed to deliver despite the challenges of slow internet bandwidth connectivity and limitations in travels, among others. We step up to be more competent in the demand of the new normal. It requires a concerted effort, prompt action, and safety protocols while balancing food security, food safety, and economic recovery. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you.